Good morning, everyone. Let's grab our seats. Happy Friday.
Did it snow again last night? Did it snow again last night?
I don't know.
Cause like this, when I like walked to school, like the sidewalk that was clear yesterday was like covered in dirt. So I was really confused. It didn't snow that much, but like the snow just popped up out of nowhere on the sidewalk.
All right, so today is the last day that I'd like to spend focusing on the Neapolitan Sixth Chord. Starting next week, we're going to learn another type of chromatic chord yet called the augmented sixth chord. But I kind of like the fact that there is a hard weekend in there, so you don't confuse one with the other. By the way, I should mention, the Neapolitan sixth chord is not a borrowed chord. I don't know if I ever mentioned it, but it's not considered a borrowed chord, nor should it be, because the root of the Neapolitan chord does not normally fit in a major or a minor key. The root of the Neapolitan chord is chromatic in both modes, so it's not like you could borrow the pitches from one mode and use it in the other to get a Neapolitan chord. It doesn't work that way. So the Neapolitan chord is not considered a borrowed chord. It's not a mode mixed chord. I'm going to get to the homework in just a minute. I know I had given you an example or done an example similar to this last class, but I just wanted to do one more just so that you see it a couple different ways. If I asked you to spell a chord in the key of B minor that in which the Roman numeral looked like this, would this really be that difficult or any different than something we've done before? No, what is to the right of the slash, what does that flat capital 2 mean? It just means a Neapolitan. Yeah. Remember, you can write, you can indicate the Neapolitan chord using either a capital N or you can use the flat capital 2. So if we were to just quickly go through this problem, in the key of B minor, what is, be careful now, what is the root of a Neapolitan or a flat? That's right, C natural, good. And then the dominant, or the fifth of C, a perfect fifth above, would give us the pitch G, G natural. Okay. And to spell a dominant seventh on G, we've probably done it 100 times over the past several semesters. It would be G, B, D, F. Yes, thank you. When I give it into the staff, you're right. Putting it in second inversion is going to make the D, put the D on the bottom. So my final answer would be something like this. See how we get that? Okay. All right, well, I just wanted to show you yet a slight variant of something that we've done before, just so that it doesn't surprise you. Let's go ahead now to the homework assignment that you had for today. You had not only the the analysis of the Schubert that was on page 206, I believe, but you also had two short part rating problems that were on page 213 in the workbook. And what I'm going to do today is, I'm going to, in a few minutes, I'm going to give you a copy from your homework quiz. But before I do that, I do want to give you an opportunity to raise any questions you might have regarding the analysis on page 206 or the part writing on page 213. Okay? So, does anyone have a question regarding any of those? Yes?
Can we do the third line and analyze
Which part of 206?
the third line?
The third line?
Yeah.
The third system?
First two measures, are they like dramatic stuff in the base part?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Let me, if I may, let me just back up a little bit. The very first line or first system of this analysis, you get a lot of different things there. I just have a 1 chord in G minor for the first 4 bars of the passage that you have. Okay? I'm not really looking for anything super detailed. And specifically, I guess, is it measure 134, 35, 36, and 37? Yeah, I just have a 1 chord for all that. Now, going down to the third system, so I guess it would start right around measure 141. I have a 4 chord right there. And there's really not much else going on. We do have chromatic motion in the left hand, in the bass. And you know, that's really the best that I could say. I would say a 4 chord for measure 141 and 142, because really all that's moving is just the bass, and it's moving by half step, so it's not really any kind of functional harmony going there. We just got a chromatic line. Okay. So, and you know, as I look at this, you know, really all you have are C's in the right hand, and you have a C in the left hand at the beginning of 141. I really, yeah, I mean, because of the measure before, I have a 4 chord. I just kept measure 141 as a 4 chord, and then 142 is nothing any different. It's just some chromatic motion.
And then 143, it keeps going like in the chromatic stuff. Is that just like a Neapolitan chord for those two measures?
Yeah, in 143, we've got the Neapolitan. However, I would say in 144, you could have something just slightly different. And what I would do is, for 144, if this makes any sense, I would treat the A flat in the bass as a pedal tone. In other words, I would treat the A flat in the left hand of 144 as a non-chord tone. And then I would just analyze the notes of the right hand in the piano of measure 144. And you can actually find a chord that, well, its function is made clear with relation or with respect to the Neapolitan. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Oh, okay.
And I'll go over this analysis more in detail later in the class. In fact, this is one of those pages that I'd like to spend the majority of the class time on, and play some of that for you on the on YouTube and so forth. But yeah, these are definitely good questions, things that will eventually be brought up. Does anyone have any questions on the part rating? This goes up to you. Did you come up, I hope you came up with a Neapolitan 6th chord in each example. Yes?
Is there a fully diminished structural 7 fully diminished 7-4 in the first one?
You can definitely have a 7 fully diminished 7-4 in the first one, you bet. Make sure I didn't forget anything. Anything else before I distribute the half-sheet quiz? Again, you will be allowed to copy your part rating. Oh, yes, go ahead.
How do the last 2 points
in, right, number 2? For the last 2 chords you're asking about, I used a 5-1. Oh, you're talking about this one here. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I would actually call this, I could call this a 4-chord, and this could be a secondary chord. This is what he was asking about. Yeah. That's one thing I have. Yeah, my examples are numbered differently, but the short part running example you have in D minor, I would just have it end on a 4-chord. It's not really a full, complete passage or progression or anything like that. I think it's too brief to be considered a modulation. So I would just end it on a G minor chord, which is a 4-chord in D, and I would precede it with a secondary chord of 4. That's what I would suggest you do. I don't know if that was altogether clear. All right, I would like to hand this half-sheet quiz out. Let's take about 10 minutes to do it. There's a few chord spellings at the top, and then there's some copy from your homework at the bottom. So, all you should need is your pencil and your workbook. On the top section, make sure you remember any accidentals you need. Don't forget to include those. Do I have everyone? So let's go first in your workbook. Let's go to the part writing examples on page 213. If you want to show you what I have, so you can compare it to what you have. Obviously, you know one of those part writing examples was on the quiz. There you go. So let's begin with the D minor table. I would hope that the Roman numerals that you chose are very similar to one. We had a question about the second to last chord in this example. And I think we could do a 7, fully diminished 7 to 4 instead of 5, 6. You could probably also somehow, I think you could squeeze in maybe a 5, 6, 5 to 4. Although that might be kind of hard to resolve correctly to the 4 since the 4 already has a B flag in it. One of the main things to remember about this is you had to use a Neapolitan, by the way, on the first beat of the first full measure. Remember, well, Ra was given to you in the soprano voice, which is good. Did you remember to double the bass in the Neapolitan? Because that's what you want to double. So you want 2 G's in that chord. And as the N6 moves to 5 in the very next beat, the Ra, which was taken down to T for you in the soprano, that's correct. You do not need to put a natural on your E. I did this because there's an E flat on the previous beat. But as the bass goes up from N6 to 5, the top 3 voices generally come down in the opposite direction. And I don't think we need any other special accidents and chords like that. Questions on this one? Let's quickly hear what it sounds. D minor is the key. The next part writing example you had was the one on the quiz. That would be an acceptable way to complete it. I think I even gave you the first chord or 2 on the quiz in terms of the part writing. So again, remember, double the bass in the Neapolitan 6. So here you want 2 E's in that C major chord. The next 2 beats, which have the same bass as you see, could use a 1, 6, 4, and a 5. Remember last class, we mentioned one of the chords that can come between the Neapolitan 6 and its ultimate goal of 5. One of the chords coming in between there is the potential 6-4. The 1, 6, 4. And you don't have the bass note there to support a 7 diminished 7 of 5, which is the other chord that can come between the Neapolitan and the dominant. Questions or comments about this one? Yes?
Can you put a sharp on the C's in here? Because there's an echo in 6.
Oh, you mean in the second to last chord?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you put a sharp on the C in the alto or there, yeah, that's fine. It should be C sharp, yeah. The key signature technically takes care of it because it's in a different voice than the C natural is in, but I see what you're saying. Good. Other comments? Questions about this one? Let's listen to this. Okay, B minor is the key. So we have does your ear pick out to the lower second scale again? It sticks out sometimes like a sore thumb. Hard to miss. All right, one other thing that I would like to do before we get to the Schubert example, the analysis, is I want to run through this part writing process one more time, because I know that there's an example with the Neapolitan part writing on the test, on the first test. So let's say you've got a passage in G minor here, and you've got a Neapolitan 6, eventually going to a 5, which resolves to a 1. And I asked you on the test, use the chord between the Neapolitan and the 5, select the chord that provides chromatic smoothing in both the soprano and the bass voice. Which one of the two that you know can come in between the Neapolitan 5 and the 5 gives me chromatic smoothing, what I talked about last class, in both the soprano and the bass voice. Does anyone remember? Good. 7 diminished 7 of 5. That would be the one. If I'm asking you to provide chromatic smoothing in both of the outer voices, the soprano and the bass, you would have to select this one. The Cadential 6/4 only gives you chromatic smoothing in the top voice. But this one gives you chromatic motion in both the soprano and the bass. So that's one thing you need to know. Second thing you need to do is, I need someone to help me spell in or voice the Neapolitan 6 and 4 voices in G minor. How do you spell the Neapolitan triad in G? What is its root? A flat. And where does A flat, where does Ra, where should you really put it? What voice? Good. Okay. Don't forget your accent. What do I double in the Neapolitan 6? The bass. Okay. So I'm going to need another C. And I think I put mine in the tenor. And the only pitch that I'm missing in the Neapolitan is the 5th of the chord, the E flat, and it's already flat from the E. So one of the things I'll be grading or looking for on the test is that, can you spell the Neapolitan 6 correctly? Did you remember to put Ra in the top voice? And did you remember the proper doubling? Those things I'm going to look for. All right. Somebody help me fill out. Let's do the bass. Let's do the bass line. What is going to be the bass note for this chromatic chord, which provides chromatic motion? C sharp, right? The only other note that comes in between C natural and D is C sharp. And then what's the bass of this? It's going to be G. We also know that I need chromatic motion, this time descending chromatic motion in the top voice. So the next note in the soprano is going to be what? A G, right? Because we're coming down by half step. And then you're still coming down by half step, you want to take Ra eventually to T. So what's the next note in the soprano? F sharp. And then that's, that's not lined up very well. And since that's in an outer voice, T of the key, then this of course is going to have to go to want you to get used to seeing this in the soprano. Ra, do, ti, and then ti will go to do. What are the solfege syllables of these three notes? Good, that's fa, fi, sol. That's the chromatics used in the bass voice. Okay. Finishing up the part writing now. Be careful. C sharp, E, G, E flat. I've got a C sharp, I've got a G. Where do you think the B flat is going to come from? Or what voice would I put the B flat in? Good. And so therefore I need an E in what voice? Alto. Now, if I just left it like this, is that correct? This is one that's very easy to overlook. Thank you. Very easy to overlook. So when the N6 goes to 7, 7, or 5, one of the voices actually goes up a little bit, just enough to, before the top three voices start coming down in front. Where is the E and the alto going to go to fill up this chord? It's going to come down to the D. And where is this note going to go? A. And then to finish off, I can just keep the D in the alto and put the B flat in the third and fourth and tenth. There's actually a lot of things to remember to write. There's a lot of things to remember not to forget, little things. And I just know from experience that on the test, if I give you a short part writing example like this, if you're not paying attention, excuse me, I've had students in the past, they lose a lot of points on this. We'll hear that in a little bit. Okay, now let's go to the workbook, page 206. And why don't we, well, you know what, let's do this first, because then I can get done with the document camera and use the recording, the sound file. This comes from another textbook that you do not have. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the piece that this passage is from. Has anyone ever heard of Schubert's Earl King? Yeah, good. It's actually a very, very good, popular, but it's a very good piece too. Since I don't know that a lot of you can see this top paragraph, I guess I'll go ahead and read it. This kind of summarizes what the Earl King is about. This is a programmatic piece by Schubert, which means he sets music, and through the process of the music and the text, there's a story being told. There's a story, a scene being told. It says, although the Neapolitan appears most frequently in first inversion, instances of the flat 2 chord in root position are also abundant in the literature. And that's the German word for Earl King. That piece is one of Schubert's most famous songs and perhaps his most touching one. It tells the story of a father riding late at night holding his child in his arms. He's got a little son. Okay. And throughout the ride in the song, the somber king of the elves, or the Earl King, is trying to steal the boy or take the boy with him by lure or by force to the realm of the spirits. After a long, tense ride in which the poor spirit boy keeps warning his father about the danger, the song ends climactically with the following words: the father reaches home with effort and toil, and in his arms the child lay dead. So it doesn't really have a happy ending, unfortunately. Okay. But that's basically the scene and what Schubert is trying to depict. The voice parts that are in Schubert's Earl King, they involve a narrator to explain what's going on. The narrator is a tenor. The Earl King himself is a tenor. The boy is a tenor, I believe, as well, but the father is a bass voice. And so what we have then altogether is at the very end of the piece, measures 134 to whatever it is, 148. I wanted to show you what you should have in terms of your analysis. I think I told you that the first system, all I have is just this one chord here. That's all I have. Okay. And hopefully when we get to hear this in a little bit, you'll notice this repeating motive over and over again. First of all, the right hand, it's kind of hard to play. Does anyone know what this notation is? How do you play that? Okay, I'm trying to think here. Well, I think mainly what you're supposed to do is the octaves, you're supposed to just go dee, 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 both of them instead of going back and forth. What's that? Yeah, that's kind of hard, you know. It's easy to get carpal tunnel syndrome, I think, when you play this. But in the left hand, we have this motive. And this motive is supposed to depict the galloping horse that the father and the son are riding late at night, trying to escape from the girl king. And it goes, okay, and if any of you heard this piece, you'll know what that means. All right, anyways, notice this accelerando here. What the accelerando, the increase in tempo, I think it portrays the father's urgency, I guess is what I have there. Urgency and spurring the horse to go faster to get away from the Earl King. Because the Earl King is hot on their tail. All right, so in measures 1/3, the next system, I have a 1 here. Then did you get a 5, 7, and a 4? Followed by a 4. So here's G, D, D, F. I call that, with a G in the bass, I call that a secondary dominant of 4, 5, 7, and 4. And here's the C minor chord right here. This is a 4 chord in G. Now, this is the very end of the entire piece. Just so you know a translation of the text, right here at the end of measure 142, it says, the father arrives at or reaches the house with effort and toil. And then it says in the German here, in his arms the child was dead. So again, there's that poor, not very happy ending. But a couple of things that or some really important things I want to draw to your attention are these. What chord does Schubert choose to harmonize the arrival of the father and the son and the horse at the house? Well, look in measures 143, measures 144, and even measures 145. What chord did you get in 143? Did you get the root position in? Okay. And then this is the one that we were kind of talking about before. If you count the A flat in the left hand as a non-chord tone, as a pedal tone, the notes in the right hand actually spell out a 7 diminished 7 again.
Maybe a 7, 4, 3.
Yes, I would accept that as well. Generally, when you have a pedal tone in the bass, inversions of the chord are not even included or counted.
Okay.
But that's, yeah, absolutely. So I would get a 7 diminished 7 or a 7 diminished 4, 3 of the Neapolitan, right? It's a G, B flat, D flat, F flat chord, which is a leading tone chord to an A flat chord. Is it possible to tonicize the Neapolitan with a secondary chord? Yeah, you bet. You've done a few. I talked about that last class. The Neapolitan is just a major triad, so it can be preceded by a secondary chord. Then, what happens to, what chord did you get in the first, what measure is that, 145? Did you get a root position Neapolitan again? Yeah. Great. What's the purpose, do you think, why do you think Schubert is tonicizing the Neapolitan? Well, not only I think does it add emphasis to that A flat chord in a G minor piece, but it also prolongs the duration of how long we hear, how long the Neapolitan chord and its related harmonies are lasting. It prolongs it. Instead of just one measure, you count this one as well, we do 1, 2, 3, and even this measure too. We get 4 measures worth of the Neapolitan harmony at the end. Does the Neapolitan chord switch to a familiar position in measure 146? Yes, what is that bass position? His first verse, yeah, Neapolitan 6, right? So he uses root position Neapolitans kind of throughout here, and then he gives you the standard Neapolitan 6. How does the Neapolitan 6 resolve? Did you get these chords at the end? This is the most important part. Right? Before the Neapolitan goes to a 5, what chord does Schubert use in between? Number 4 there, right? 7 diminished 7 of 5. So if you see how, well, this has got to be at least, it's got to be about 200 years ago when Schubert wrote this, the early 1800s. And he's using this very same progression that we've been looking at studying here. Neapolitan 6, going to 7 diminished 7 of 5, 5, and then 1. And this is also in the key of G minor too. Okay, now, I want to show you Schubert's voice lead so that you know that he's not just kind of, not paying attention or smoking something. He knows what he's doing, and he's paying attention to the details. It's hard to follow the voice leading, but you see how Schubert uses in the voice part the A flat, that is raw. And do you see how it's also in the top voice of the right hand of the piano in measure 146? Didn't I ask you to put raw consistently in the soprano, the top voice? Well, Schubert's doing that. Now, let's take a look at the right hand of the piano. Where does raw go to? Doesn't it go down chromatically to G, to Do? And then doesn't that in the top voice of the piano go down to T? And then doesn't that come back up to Do? Is Schubert following, he didn't call it chromatic smoothing, I'm sure, but isn't he doing the same thing I told you to do for part writing? Ra, the top voice, Do, T, Do. All in the top voice. What's happening in the bass? Isn't there chromatic smoothing there? C natural, C sharp, D, and then tonic G. So does Schubert get an A for part writing? I would give him an A, yeah. A plus kind of thing. Okay, so let's see here. You'll have to follow along in your book. I do want to play a little bit of this recording for you. I'll follow along in your score, because I can't have both the music and the score showing and sounding at the same time. Okay. Why am I not getting anything? See if I turn this off with that bubble. Okay, so can you look at the top of your I have it right where your book is. Kind of an ominous ending. Can I ask you? I want to point out just a few things. Schubert, by the way, was a master of text. He really knew how to describe or depict a text through what he did in the music. And you see how at the last two systems it says the father arrives home with effort and toil. What about the texture that changes around measure 146? What about the texture of the music kind of depicts the father getting to the house? Can you think of anything? They get? Okay, and but what in the music is kind of, okay? Yeah, first of all, you got, well, one thing, you got fermatas over the 7 diminished 7 of 5 for suspense maybe. But I don't want you to miss one of the main things in measure 146. Can you imagine the father comes home on the horse and the horse isn't galloping anymore? Do you see how all that, all stops? It just comes to a half note chord and then there's a rest. It's like, rein in the horse, we're not galloping anymore. The triplet eighths cease in the accompaniment. Okay, you've got the fully diminished 7th chord, which is kind of an ominous sounding chord. What happened to the dynamics starting in measure 146? They get pretty soft, don't they? Yeah. Whereas before it was all really loud. It gets really soft. And then what kind of cadence do we have dynamically? We get a really loud cadence, don't we? Okay. Also notice I think the rests, not only in measure 146, but also between these two chords at the end. I think there's rests in measure 147. I think that really heightens the dramatic effect of what's happening there as well. The pauses in between the chords. And then finally, do you see how there's a change of tempo just for the last two chords? What's the tempo change to? It's not allegro or telerando, but rather andante, right? Do you see that over the second to last chord, the andante? Did you look at it? Okay. So yeah, I would say Schubert was a master at text painting. And by the way, this kind of puts, I don't know if I should mention or not, it kind of puts me and everyone else to shame, but do you know how old Schubert was when he wrote this? 14. Close. He was 18. He wrote this when he was 18 years old. And it's really too bad that I'm not getting a signal over here either. I really want, you should YouTube this because there's this really nice video that someone has constructed. Have you seen the video? Yeah. A very nice video that someone has constructed, which for some reason it's not displaying on the screen right now. But maybe in a future class I can show you that. Anyways, okay, so as we get ready to go here, let's talk about your next assignment. One more assignment on the Neapolitan chord. You can see it's in both assignments are in the workbook. It's page 211, number 6, and then page 213, G, number 3. And those are the two parts to the assignments for Monday. And remember, believe it or not, Monday is February 1. So, I guess have a good weekend, and I won't see you until February. Yeah, see you next month, right?
Really made that girl smack.
Ooh, we have our own concert already. Oh, very good. It's okay, I have like 5 copies.
Yeah.
I'm getting the